Welcome to the Monday, April 3rd, 2023 session of the Lake Forest City Council. Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Certainly. Honorable Mayor Pandeleon.
Here.
Alderman Morris.
Here.
Alderman Novit. Here. Alderman Rummel.
Here.
Alderman Notes.
Here.
Alderman Preschlack is absent. Alderman Gushkarian.
Here.
Alderman Bushman.
Here.
Alderman Weber.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excuse me. Well, welcome everyone. First thing on our agenda tonight is comments by the mayor. I have actually a few things to talk about tonight. First of all, if you look in the back of the room, you'll notice that there's a portrait missing. That is the portrait of Jim Swarthout, who sadly passed away last Thursday, former mayor. And on behalf of the city council, I'd like to express our profound sadness to the Swarthout family on Jim's passing. Jim served as mayor from 1975 to 1978. After many years in the city government as plan commissioner, alderman, and I think more before that. During his tenure, he was able to bring the Chicago Bears to Lake Forest. That's before they built Hallis Hall. They were secluded in Ferry Hall for a period of a year or two, and that was on Jim's watch. And also, Jim was deeply involved in the acquisition of Deer Path Park and the construction of the rec center. So quite a legacy. He leaves a lasting legacy as a friend to all and a great community leader, always smiling and upbeat. He was a kind, genuine, and humble man. He was never too busy or too important to offer friendship, help, appreciation, and encouragement to others. He saw the good in all those around him, and he really epitomized the concept of city over self. A formal resolution of sympathy will be read at the Monday, April 17th City Council meeting. Secondly, most people know that tomorrow is Election Day, finally. And City Hall is not open for voting. The county clerk changed the Ward 3 voting locations, and they're 3 different places depending on what precinct you're in. So please check the county clerk's website to make sure you're going to the right place to vote. It is not Christ Church. That's the one thing for sure, which is where it's been for a number of years. Third, this morning, I received a call from Congressman Brad Schneider confirming that he is has included a $3.2 million federal grant for the Seminary Ravine project in his annual appropriation request. This is a first but critical step in a lengthy process, which we hope will be successful in obtaining 80% federal funding for this important infrastructure project. So nice to know that our congressman is pulling for us. And then the other bit of news is the legislation that we proposed, or the change to the public meeting legislation that requires people who make public comment at public meetings to be named as defendants in any subsequent lawsuits. That language, which was crafted by our city attorney and submitted to Senator Julie Morrison for inclusion in an appropriate bill, has actually made it through the Senate, and I think it goes to the House next, where it's expected to be approved, and so hopefully this legislative session we will fix that unfortunate situation.
Great.
So, and then lastly, actually second to last, we have the Arbor Day proclamation. There's nothing the City Council has to do on this except listen to me read it. Whereas Arbor Day will be officially observed in the state of Illinois on Friday, April 28th, 2023 by proclamation of the governor, and the planting of trees on Arbor Day is a traditional activity throughout the state and the city of Lake Forest. And whereas Lake Forest, with its environment of natural trees, is particularly dedicated to the observance of this day and has consistently throughout its history enacted ordinances to preserve its trees and other natural assets. And whereas citizen groups, garden clubs, and private and public institutions have actively supported preservation efforts and the renewal of natural trees through tree planting and landscape projects. And whereas the celebration of Arbor Day 2023 in Lake Forest will include the distribution of tree seedlings to the public at designated locations. And Arbor Day 2023 will be celebrated throughout the day in programs at schools and other locations. And at the Lake Forest Water Plant located at 1441 North Lake Road on Friday, April 28th at 10 a.m., where the city's official Arbor Day tree, an oak tree, will be planted. And whereas trees in our city, wherever they are planted, increase property values, enhance our business and residential areas, beautify our community, and are a source of joy to gladden the hearts and promote the environmental well-being of present and future generations. And whereas the City of Lake Forest has been recognized as a Tree City USA for 43 consecutive years by the National Arbor Day Foundation. Now, therefore, I, George Pandeleon, Mayor of the City of Lake Forest, do hereby proclaim Friday, April 28th, 2023 as Arbor Day in the City of Lake Forest. And I urge all citizens to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands, to support our city's forestry program, to plant trees on this day, and to join in the celebration ceremonies. In witness hereof, I have hereunder set my hand and have had the seal of the City of Lake Forest affixed this 28th day of April 2023. Another news item for those of you who were out of town last week, our 10th new restaurant opened up in the last 3 years. Hometown Coffee and Juice opened on Monday. Apparently they thought opening during spring break would give them an opportunity to have a soft opening. Nothing turned out to be further from the truth. They were swamped immediately and have been playing catch up ever since. But definitely worth a try and wonderful new addition to our dining scene. So, and I know that there are a couple of other sites and a couple of other very substantial restaurant operators who are closing in on additional opportunities. So all of a sudden, Lake Forest, in a short 3 years, has become a bit of a dining destination, which is great. We wanted vibrancy, we're getting vibrancy. Last, I have a comment related to omnibus item number 3 about Lake Forest being an idle-free community. Nobody's idle here, right? Since its creation in 2020, the Environmental Sustainability Committee has recognized reducing the city's greenhouse gas emissions as a top focus area in its long-range planning. Transportation activities are the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S., and this trend holds true here in Lake Forest, as a recent inventory study found that 42% of Lake Forest greenhouse gas emissions are produced by transportation activities. In fact, the average per capita emissions for on-road transportation in Lake Forest is nearly double the Lake County average. While there are a number of initiatives the ESC has identified to help reduce emissions, the reduction of vehicle idling was found to be a straightforward, effective, and relatively non-disruptive strategy to help alter this trend. It's my pleasure to announce that in the omnibus portion of our agenda, a voluntary resolution is included proclaiming Lake Forest as an idle-free community. While there are exceptions, residents, guests, and visitors of the city will be encouraged not to idle their vehicles throughout the city in efforts to reduce vehicle emissions and to protect the health, economy, and natural environment of the city of Lake Forest. In anticipation of this resolution, in March, the city held an art contest asking for Lake Forest students to submit artwork that could be used on temporary no vehicle idling signs to be placed at participating schools and other locations around the city. We have some slides here displaying some of the submissions, which are quite good. So you can, are there multiple slides, Biddy, or just one? Just the one, okay. So watch the city's communications channels for the announcement of the contest winners and to see some more of these great designs. So hopefully we'll make progress on this issue. That concludes my comments. Moving on, we have comments by the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council. Good evening. I have several items to comment on tonight, but I'm going to begin with tonight's Community Spotlight, and I'm pleased to introduce the President of the Library Board, John Johnson. It's been a little while since we've had the library here, and it's a really opportune time to invite JJ to be with us. As many know, it's a very busy time at the library, both physically and programmatically, and all this activity is also occurring on a milestone anniversary year for the library as well. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to JJ and let him share his story.
Jason, thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, City Council, thank you for having me this evening. I'd like to give you an update on what goes on inside the building because everyone drives by and admires what the building looks like on the outside. We're restoring that, and you've all noticed scaffolding going up. This will give you an idea what goes on inside the building, and then we'll talk about
Lake
those
Forest
facts in just a
Library
moment.
inspires lifelong learning, promotes the free and respectful exchange of ideas, and builds community. We provide thousands of books and items to borrow, skilled librarians, reading programs and book discussions, and quiet spaces to read and study. There are so many other ways the library is there for Lake Foresters, including special collections, concierge service, technology and coding classes, engaging events, and community involvement. The library serves Lake Foresters of all ages. Consider how story times benefit multiple generations. Children benefit from being read to and developing school readiness. New parents benefit from meeting and forming supportive peer groups. Grandparents benefit from sharing an activity with their grandchildren. The library also serves Lake Foresters through life's transitions. Recent graduates use library databases to further their education or launch their careers. New residents join book groups to meet new people. Entrepreneurs find information from library resources to build and grow their businesses. Retirees get answers about using their tech devices during classes and one-on-one help sessions. Individuals confined at home or a care facility access the library through homebound delivery and virtual events. Throughout the year, Lake Forest Library hosts author events, book discussions, and informative presentations on literature, history, art, business, the environment, and more. Signature events include Lake Forest Reads, our one book, one community program that invites all Lake Foresters to read and discuss the same book each fall. Read Between the Ravines, our two communities, one nonfiction book program that brings together Lake Bluff and Lake Forest each spring to explore a topic of current relevance. 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten, our early literacy program that supports families in developing a love of reading in their babies and toddlers. Lake Forest Library is in a beautiful landmark building near Lake Forest College, Market Square, and the train. The library is a gateway to try something new and discover everything that Lake Forest has to offer. We believe passionately in the transformative power of ideas and the future of libraries, enabling everyone in the community to fulfill the universal desire to learn, explore, and belong.
So I know some of you have been to some of those events. Some of you have heard about some of those events. I was there this afternoon. In the lower level, there's a row of screens, and the mother was there with her two children. A young lady who had a definite idea of the author she was looking for, so she was helping her find it on the screen. And a young man that was only interested in dinosaur and truck books. And she was helping him use that subject to find some books with the help of the librarian. So people come there for all kinds of reasons. There's a special family children focus on our events. and all of you know and hear about our regular author events. What's increasingly popular are digital, but not for all the reasons you think. Some people like to read books on their digital devices. Some of them are out of town and they like to bring their book with them on the plane, wherever they're going. We now can read magazines from 120 countries. So if you have a particular interest in a country and what goes on there, and you have a gift for languages, and you'd like to read an Italian magazine in Italian, you can get that as a digital resource. So we've extended the broad reach. It's not just substituting for what you can get in the library. There's an opportunity to do current things, but there's also an opportunity to go to places ordinarily that you probably wouldn't be able to get to on short notice. So you can download a number of apps, Libby, Hoopla, there's Press Reader. There are all kinds of people at the library that will help you figure that out. And the most popular time for digital devices at the library is January, because a lot of people get gifts. So your grandchildren might buy you gifts, your children might buy you gifts. They are buying you gifts they think you need, and you have no idea how to use them. Just come to the library and we'll help you figure it out. We also have special collections. We have extra copies of all the Lake Forest author books. We have takeout tech, accessibility kits. I brought a couple so that you could see what they look like. You've all seen pictures. But this is an accessibility kit to help a kid with reading. Ages 4 to 8, helps with phonics skills and other things. And there are a lot of different fun things inside here that a family can take. And this is one that's a special one for accessibility. So if you have emotional, expression, learning, focus issues, attention focus, there are tools and books in here that would help you. So there are a lot of specialized kits like this. There's one on engineering, there's one on art, and kids can pick the one they want. They check it out, bring it home, and bring it back. And the price of the kit is on the bag, so the parent knows that it needs to come back. We also have Wonder Books that look like this, where you can press a button and you can have questions asked about the book, or you can have a read-along, and it's your choice. And we have some learning games, matching, phonics. There are different ways to learn. Every kid learns differently, and we give lots of options for parents to choose. So that's what a Wonder Book looks like. And this is what a launch pad looks like. And I've just shown you the accessibility kits. So circulation, we measure everything at the library. So if you want to know who's taking books out, what ages, all that stuff, we measure it. So the e-media, you can see since 2019, has almost doubled in activity. Half of it is adults, half of it is kids. Access to databases remains fairly constant. The kids are winning the reading contest this year. Last year they won it, and this year they're trending. More books come out because of kids than adults. Dome Project. Jason said, be sure you include something about the Dome Project. So in this very room, in July of 2021, we were coming out of COVID. I had been on the Board of Trustees 1 year and had not met my colleagues. I learned that one was very tall, one was very short, and we're meeting here. And the power goes out right in the middle of the building committee discussion. So I said, take out your flashlights. We all carry them now. We're going to finish this meeting. And that's when we started the prioritization of the dome. We did a public bid, found Wish Janney Elsner could do both structural and architect work. We did a public bid to find out, based on the spec that Wish Janney Elsner put together, what was the best firm to do it, and chose Marshall Roofing. And they're the ones right now doing all the scaffolding work and finding things as they pull off the cover. So we get a weekly report with pictures. So we know every time they have a slice, and they did the northeast first, found a lot of rotten wood, underneath, so we're gonna replace all that, and they're gonna do a pie slice at a time. We've hired Drone Nation to do flyovers on a regular basis. They're the ones that did the city flyovers. And he's donated more than half of the fee because he grew up in Lake Forest and loves the library. So in the fall, you'll be able to see, fast forward, the whole project. We expect, weather permitting, by early August, mid-August, for the scaffolding to come down. We expect the roof part to be done by the end of June. There's a lot of gutter work and a lot of water remediation work. The original dome did not have gutters, did not have a water remediation plan, so the courtyards were big bathtubs. In the 1950s, the Board of Trustees decided to put gutters in. A few winters later, they decided to put electric cables in. But the gutters that were put in are not sufficient to capture enough water as they come off. They're a little narrow. So those have been redesigned by Wiz Janney. You won't be able to tell by looking at those from the sidewalk. So we're improving from a design point of view, some of the structural things. From an aesthetics point of view, it's going to look beautiful. It'll be copper, but it'll be zinc-coated copper. It'll have a uniform gray color. The lead-coated copper also had a uniform gray color, but it discolored because of all the pollutants in the air. So that's why you saw the blackness in some of the pictures that you might recall. While COVID was going on, we completed our infrastructure products in IT. The data network was upgraded. We had fiber to the building. We upgraded our telephone network. We installed the RFID so you have contactless, just put a book on a platform and it checks out for you. Kids love doing that. They were the ones that adopted to the new technology just like that, the first week. Adults, a little bit more reluctant to move along. We have already approved a new AC chiller, which is being installed this month, and a new boiler is coming. And we are upgrading the path lighting. There's some darkness on our walking paths at night, and we're upgrading that. So those have already been approved, orders are placed, and work is done, and we are going to carefully look at the next phases. We have 9 bathrooms. None of them are ADA accessible. There are 5 on the main floor, 4 in the basement. So we got to figure that out. We have bookshelves in areas that where we should have better traffic flow, so we just need to relook at the space based on the way it's being used. And we'll do it in phases. For those of you that want to know what the numbers are, I had to put this chart in. The blue is the revenue from taxes and other sources. The orange is expense. And then we've been able to manage to have a small surplus that we've accumulated a reserve, which enables us to go after the larger projects like the dome and the boiler. This year, you'll see total revenue of $4.5 million. It's broken up into what's property tax, non-tax, library revenue from fees and other things that we're doing, and then gifts that we get and friends' contributions. You'll notice, I know Elizabeth can see right away, the expenses is higher than the revenue this year. The reason for that is we are using some of our reserves on the dome project. The dome project will be all in construction and fees about $1.2 million. And we have sufficient reserves to cover that. We have a boiler going in and we have a new chiller going in. So those are the reason that the buildings and grounds orange number is just under $1 million. We typically don't have that each year. It's our 125th anniversary. When I took on this role, I started reading the minutes of our library board since 1898. July 6th was the first meeting. The city council approved the first board of trustees, and they went over and met in someone's house late afternoon on a Saturday and decided who was going to be president and secretary and all. And they met quarterly for years. And this floor was where the library was. And people started bringing books that they thought ought to be in our library. And they were kind of messed around. There was no one really keeping charge of them. In 1903, the Board of Trustees said, we got to have someone keep charge of them, and we have to have someone put them in decent order. And they approved a typewriter. so they could put labels on each book on where they were going to be. We are planning some family-friendly activities in July 8th. We're going to have on the front lawn some festivities. There'll be fun things for families. We'll have a fall dome dedication, ribbon cutting when all the work is done at some appropriate time. And we're going to have a night at the library. The Friends are organizing a night at the library, which will be a special gala, kind of a fundraiser, with some special art on display. So the Friends have funded a curator project with Heinemann Appraisal this year. So we have taken all of the artwork and all of the historic documents we have that are worthy with value, and they have appraised them. And we're carefully looking at those. Some are on display, some are not. So we will have a special night on November 3rd with people who explain what they are, where they came from, and have some fun. So. The foundation was chartered recently, a couple years ago, to support the library for two reasons. One, to create and maintain an endowment long-term, and the other is to raise funds for special capital projects when necessary. There was not the capacity on the Board of Trustees or within the Friends to do this on a long-term basis. And the board, previous to me joining, thought this was a good idea. I support this idea. So we have an independent organization that focuses on that, and we've had several generous donations to begin the endowment. There's no special capital project plan right now. The Friends, as you know, have been around a long time, since '76. The idea for them came at a board meeting when one of the Board of Trustees, Russ Core, said, you know, it was the 75th anniversary. It would be nice if we had a Friends group to plan a 75th birthday for the library. And there was not one at the time. So that was the germ of the idea. It was chartered several years after that discussion. They provide annual support to the programs of the library. I wanted to be sure all of you knew there is a book sale planned this year. They wanted me to be sure I told you there was setup and a sale. You're welcome to come to both. There's also a children's book sale in June. This will be the 10th children's book sale. And they have received 20 applications for high school scholarships this year. So they will provide 3 $2,000 scholarships based on an essay and an interview. So all are welcome at the Lake Forest Library, all ages, all abilities, and we are delighted to share this story with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Great to see progress. And I know that chillers and boilers aren't the most exciting thing in the world, but it sure is important that they work when you need them. And I understand they haven't been working very well lately, so.
Oh, the board felt it was time. You can fix things for so long when it's difficult to get parts. When you don't get the efficiency out of the products, it's time to make some other decisions. And they've moved on 3 areas already. We've done a mechanical engineering and plumbing, electrical study, and we're looking carefully at all the other pieces. And we couldn't do any of this without the help of the city. Bernard Poindexter was at a meeting. He's from the Public Works area, helping us with the water remediation. Every time we go through budget reviews, Elizabeth's team is right there with us. We're in the process of hiring an executive director, and Amber Campbell is right there with us with the background check and the process to onboard. So we are very appreciative of all the city staff. And when we don't know what to do, we call Jason or Kathy Zerniak, and they help us find the right department. So thank you very much.
Alderman Morris.
Right. I've been talking to JJ over a number of years as he's taken this on, and I have to say the methodology that you and the board have followed has been very impressive, and just compliment you on your diligence to follow through step by step and bring it to where it's at. It's terrific.
Well,
So,
thank you. This is my
thanks.
3rd year as trustee and my 2nd year as president, so there'll be someone new coming.
Good job.
So
Yeah.
I'm delighted to serve.
Good job.
Alderman Weber.
Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson. I just wanted to comment that I make my way over to the library about every other week with my kids. And so all of these items that you've shared tonight have brought a plethora of education and entertainment. And it's really wonderful. In fact, it even goes beyond. They have Nintendo Switches you can check out. So if you have 2 children, you only want to spend, $400 on one, you can borrow, check out another one. even to the point where my 8-year-old now can log in and search for certain categories of books like Star Wars, and he can put them on reserve, and then we get a call to come pick them up when they're there from other neighboring libraries too within the network. So it's really a wonderful asset. And thank you and your board for all of your leadership.
Thank you. We are members of a 30 library network. We have 115,000 books and items at our library. We have access to another million throughout this network. And those are 1 million titles, but there are 5 million items that we can bring in for book clubs and others. We don't have to have everything, but we cater the collection to this community and fine tune it that way, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, JJ.
Alderman Bushman?
Mr. Johnson, if I could just add to that, the fact that all the services you provide, the resources you have, it's truly amazing. And so it's most appreciated. And, you know, I know you just touched on many, and I have some familiarity with a little bit more in the media room and things like that. And so you're providing a great service to our community. I do appreciate that. We all appreciate it. One question on the dome work. Is all the work exterior, or is there anything being done interior as part of this work?
So there are 2 pieces to the interior. What's under the dome is a structure, wooden structure, and we're finding a lot of rotten wood that we're replacing. There is some plastering that needs to be done inside in the rotunda. And then
Is
the
that
last,
in the mural area?
in the mural area, those will be restored in the next year. We have a quote from an organization in Oak Park right now that we're carefully looking at. We don't have a donor yet, but we expect to put that on the list. But the plaster work for the functionality of the rotunda will be completed as part of this project, so.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Great to hear from you, and
Thanks for the opportunity.
keep up the good progress.
Great, thank you so much, JJ, for coming. A couple other quick updates for the community. Believe, yeah, we have our ward meeting slide. Just a reminder to the public that our annual ward meetings begin next week. We hope all residents will come and attend. It's a wonderful opportunity both for the community to hear from their aldermen about the state of the city and some of the initiatives underway, but more importantly, it's an opportunity for the aldermen to hear from the residents and their constituents in the community about what's on their minds. So we'll continue to promote this over the next couple of weeks very heavily through all of our communications platforms, but just wanted to remind the public that our ward meetings are beginning next week. The first one is Ward 3 on Tuesday, April 11th. And then last, a couple quick updates for the community. Some people may be aware that a couple of weeks ago, the U.S. EPA announced proposed changes to federal drinking water regulations for 6 different PFAS chemicals. It's currently under review, but if approved, the proposed rule would set maximum contaminant levels at 4 parts per trillion, which is a significant reduction from current enforceable federal standards. While city staff will continue following the discussions at the federal level, I do want to remind Lake Forest residents that all historic drinking water sampling meets both current applicable state and federal regulations, as well as the newly proposed U.S. EPA drinking water rule. In fact, in our last 3 quarterly tests have not detected any level of PFAS in the Lake Michigan water that we treat and supply to the community. I would also remind the community that in addition to the city's annual water quality report, which we include annually in our dialogue newsletter, all historic PFAS sampling tests are provided on the city's website. We provide that in the interest of transparency, and so anyone who has interest in the city's sampling history can find that information on our website. Also, while we don't generally discuss, pending litigation in open session, I do want to acknowledge that the city recently joined several other North Shore communities in filing a lawsuit against several PFAS manufacturers. As I just noted, while Lake Forest's drinking water continues to meet all applicable drinking water regulations, The intent of the lawsuit is to protect ratepayers from the ongoing costs that we're incurring to continually sample, analyze, and meet the reporting requirements, and to proactively protect ratepayers for potential future treatment requirements should regulatory standards continue to evolve further. So we have included some basic language on that on the city's website, on our water treatment plant page as well. And again, we'll keep the city council apprised as that matter proceeds. And that concludes my report this evening.
Thank you, Jason. Any questions on any of Jason's comments? Okay. Next on the agenda is the opportunity for citizens to address the city council on non-agenda items. I have a request from Mary Matthews. Would you like to come forward, please?
Thank you for that introduction. I was afraid of following JJ, so this is much better. Hello, I'm Mary Matthews, and I'm here to talk about PFAS, also known as forever chemicals, again. Previously, I voiced my concerns about PFAS in plastic grass and suggested articles by Tribune reporter Michael Hawthorne. I spoke about the EPA's regulatory steps, which you just heard a little bit about, and that 3M will stop manufacturing PFAS due to lawsuits. But that was disregarded or dismissed, and questions from 3 fellow aldermen were ignored, along with information provided by other residents. Instead, the concerns discussed focused on goose poop and playability. Neither are long-term benefits to the general public welfare. Following the mayor's directions, 5 aldermen knowingly voted for 9.5 acres of plastic grass with PFAS. But that is the runoff under the bridge or down the Skokie River to contaminate the drinking water of St. Louis, New Orleans, and hundreds of smaller communities. I wonder about your concern for PFAS in Lake Michigan. The Public Works page describes how the city joined a lawsuit against 3M in order to protect ratepayers and ensure that costs associated with sampling for and removing PFAS from our water supplies are borne by the manufacturers. Now that the city acknowledges some of the ramifications of PFAS and therefore plastic grass, isn't the city culpable after knowingly voting for the product in spite of environmental damage and public health risk? If the athletic fields were located east of Green Bay Road, would the vote still have followed the plastic option while poisoning our drinking water? Is it okay to poison the Skokie River, but 3M has to pay for Lake Michigan? Not only are forever chemicals found just in water, but also in soil and air. How will that contamination be mitigated? Exposure to these chemicals have been linked to numerous serious health conditions. Backing the plastic grass option appears questionable and not in the best interest of the community. Enjoy your celebration on Thursday.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is committee reports. We have a report from the Finance Committee. Consideration of an ordinance authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds, Series 2023, first reading. Just as a quick preface, I'd like to remind the council that this is a project where the contracts have been executed. Construction has actually begun. And so the bond issue is really a question of how are we going to pay for it. The bond issue is one option. The other option is to pay for it with reserves. That's what's in front of us. So, Elizabeth?
Thank you, Mayor Pantaleon. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. As Mayor Pantaleon has introduced, on February 21st, the City Council approved various contracts and bids totaling about $16.4 million for the Deer Path Park Improvement Project. That project is underway. And the direction from the council was to finance that project with $12 million in bond proceeds, $4 million in general fund operating surplus for fiscal year 23, and about $400,000 from the Park and Public Land Fund for the tennis court and pickleball court renovations. We have been working aggressively with Spear Financial and Bond Counsel Chapman and Cutler on preparing the necessary documents and preparing for the bond sale on April 17th. Included in your packet was the draft preliminary official statement and the draft bond ordinance for your consideration of first reading this evening. A couple notes, I did want to just advise the council, you may wonder why the bond ordinance is for $10.8 million in bond par value. The reason for that is that we've directed Spear Financial to generate the lowest possible bond issue that will generate net $12 million after bond issuance costs. Given the bond market today, Spear Financial anticipates those bonds will sell at a premium, which means that the purchaser of the bonds must pay more than par value of the bonds. And so the $10.8 million is their current estimate of the par value that will generate the full $12 million in net proceeds for the project. We have provided the bond documents and the preliminary official statement to Moody's Investor Service. We did have our rating call last Wednesday, March 29th, with the rating analyst with Moody's. Provided a presentation based on a list of questions they provided in advance of the call. And we are scheduled to receive the rating on the bond issue on April 12th. So when we know that and have received the official word from Moody's Investor Service, we'll be sure and pass that along to the City Council. We are scheduled to go to auction the morning of April 17th. So as you can see in your bond ordinance this evening, there are a lot of blanks in the bond ordinance because we don't have the specific bid data to incorporate in the ordinance at this time. But you can see the general form of the bond ordinance and information presented. What will happen is that bond auction will occur the morning of April 17th. Spear Financial will review the lowest bid, confirm the par value of the bonds to ensure that $12 million in net proceeds will be generated by the issue. And then a recommendation will be provided to you in your City Council meeting on April 17th to approve and grant final approval of the bond ordinance. With that, we are seeking the City Council's first reading approval of the draft bond ordinance, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions for Elizabeth? Alderman Morris?
This is head of the Finance Committee. I would just recommend approving the bond issue. Elizabeth's put together. It's nice to see the premium that they're going to have to pay, so that's been a big plus. I assume that implies a AAA bond rating, but we'll see what happens on the 12th. But I think this is the right way to go.
Yeah, I
Alderman Kashgarian?
have a question, either for Chairman Morris or Director Holub. A little bit of a Groundhog Day, and I can already anticipate the vote. This is first reading. Do we have the authority to waive the next reading and just vote on it this evening?
We could not do that because we don't have the bid information, so we don't have any of the financial data to
all right,
include
thank you.
and incorporate into the bond ordinance, but
Okay, thank you very much.
Alderman Bushman?
I take it this matter does go to a vote on the first reading, and then there'll be a second reading.
Correct.
And I appreciate your comments early on, Mr. Mayor, as to the issues before us. By way of background, myself and maybe some others have always been concerned as to whether we're overcommitting to artificial turf, whether we really should have done more in terms of natural grass and the commitment to improve that, the environmental concerns that we've talked about, and more recently, the fact that we seem to be overbuilding for what historically needed and used at Deer Path. So for those reasons, I continue to struggle with the city spending these amounts. I know the majority has spoken for, the contracts, but at this stage, I think I'll have to abstain from supporting the bonds because of the reasons given.
Okay. Certainly your privilege. Alderman Rumble?
Are there additional costs to issuing this bond? And we're paying bond counsel, we're paying some attorneys. Is that included then in the amount of the bond that we're issuing, or is that coming out of our
It's included
budget.
in the bond issue. So Spear Financial will work to achieve $12 million net after bond issuance costs. They were working on an estimate of issuance costs today, but I didn't receive a final number. I don't think they've heard from everyone, but I would estimate that's going to be about $60,000 all in.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman Novit.
I have one. What is our reserve amount?
What
When the
reserve
alternative
amount?
is paying for this either through issuing a bond or from reserves or from general operating, right? What's in the reserve?
So most likely the capital improvement fund in your 5-year forecast after your 5-year projects incorporated in the 5-year CIP. I think you have about 21 million remaining in the capital improvement fund. You have a lot of unfunded projects for which you will consider funding those in
Right.
future years, but there is a healthy fund balance in the capital improvement fund.
Thank you.
Okay. If there are no further comments or questions, I would offer the public an opportunity to speak on this issue. If anybody's interested? Seeing none, I would bring it back to the council for a motion to authorize an ordinance, to approve an ordinance authorizing issuance of general obligation bonds, Series 2023, first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Weber.
Aye.
Alderman Morris.
Aye.
Alderman Novit.
Nay.
Alderman Rommel.
Consistent with my vote on this project, I'm voting nay.
Alderman Notes.
Aye.
Alderman Gashgarian.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Nay.
I thought you were going to abstain.
I was, but I was persuaded otherwise by the comments made. Thank you.
So that, so an ordinance requires 5 votes because it's a majority of the city council, but it is an opportunity if the mayor desires to vote for the mayor to vote.
I'm confused. I thought I was, because we discussed this last week, I thought we just needed a simple majority.
It is a majority of the entire council, and so that is 9, and so that requires 5 votes in
Oh,
favor.
that was the specific question I asked, and I didn't get that answered last week.
It is 5.
Okay. So,
Could I ask a clarifying question on that?
Sure.
Our code seems to be very specific as to when the mayor has a vote, namely when it's a tie. And I don't recall seeing anything else in our ordinances that said anything different.
Right, so this has come up in the past a few years ago, this exact issue, just for a different vote, that went 4-3. And I did provide the research at that time, which I could do again, but it's very clear under state statute in that the mayor has an opportunity to vote in 3 circumstances. One is when there is a tie. One is when half of the aldermen are in favor of a matter, so an ordinance, resolution, or a motion. And the other is when a supermajority vote is required. So in this case, the second circumstance, half of the aldermen voted in favor, 4 of 8, that the mayor does have a statutory right to vote. Not an obligation, but a right. And that is also consistent with the city council meeting policies. The principles also sets out those 3 specific situations.
And as I recall from the earlier time, that exception in terms of a home rule unit was considered falling under the form of government exception to a home rule, because typically home rule can act on its own and apply its own rules
Yeah.
unless it's preempted by the state.
Correct. There are a lot of opportunities for home rule to change the way things are done, but the form of government, the authority of the mayor in this case, or if it were city council, is not something that the city could
And the
change
law
by
is clear
code.
on that?
Yes, yes.
well, in light of the fact that the alternative is to take money from reserves, which is then going to deny the opportunity to build a number of other projects that we have in our plan, and also the fact that the city is able to issue this debt at very favorable terms and interest rates, I'm going to vote yes.
5 yea, 3 nay, motion carries.
Thank you, everyone. Next on the agenda is a report from the Public Works Committee on Forest Park bluff slope stabilization from Mike Thomas and Byron Coots.
Good evening. Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Byron's voice is a little bit shot, so I'm going to take the first couple of slides for him. With us this evening is Dave Kraft. Dave is with Hay and Associates. He and his team are the ones that designed the Bluff project for us. They've done a number of designs for our ravines as well as open lands too. So to begin with, just some simple background. We've been talking about the project obviously for a number of years with City Council. We obviously did work on both the south and the north ends, but I'd like to bring you to the middle of this slide, the July 19th, 2022. We'll pick up at that point where we had the project fully completed as far as the design. We placed the project out to bid. We had two bidders. Lowest bid came in at $3,443,000. The second bidder was at $4,007,000. We had a budget of $3.5 million. If we were to add our contingency onto the low bid, we would have been automatically over the budget amount. The bigger point for that initial bid opening, though, was that both contractors had a number of line items that were not filled out in the bid. So both bids were incomplete. They could not get numbers for steel, for example. Even though we placed the project out to bid for over a month, they were having a difficult time acquiring numbers. So we went ahead, went back and placed the project out to bid again 1 month later. The projects came in at $3,869,000. The other one was at $4,449,000. Again, both of them were above our budget. So we took the winter months with Dave Kraft and his team to go through and work with the contractors that were interested in the project, look at the design, see if there was anything that we could tighten up. We then, at the budget finance meeting in November, requested some additional dollars, approximately $1,450,000. Those dollars have been budgeted in the the upcoming fiscal year capital budget. We will add that 1.450 to the 3.5 to make it $4,950,000. We went ahead and had our project bid opening at the end of February. Same two bidders that we received. Byron will review that in much further detail. Overall, general, why are we doing this? What are the benefits? What are the needs? We obviously, the slope stability, there are a few areas along that bluff that we have all seen that have moved. Alderman Morris noted of another one this evening when we spoke. And that when we have above average rainfall, the significant impacts on that bluff are very concerning to us. So to a certain extent, as we sit here today, is that bluff going to fall? No, it's not. If we have a heavy winter and or heavy rainfall season, we are putting that bluff at a good amount of risk. So this project really is proactive to go after that and to really hold up that bluff for many, many years to come. It obviously, as we note here, will protect the tableland and the investment that the Forest Park Project Board put in, well over $2.5 million. And then obviously the beach property and the roads below. Interestingly enough, we have two sanitary sewers that run down the middle of this bluff. We have a large sanitary sewer that runs down the North Beach Access Road, runs along the bluff all the way to the south to the NSSD pumping station. Approximately where the ring road comes in off of Spring Lane, we have both an 8 and a 21-inch sanitary that go down that bluff and tee into this one line. If that bluff was to fail at that point and we have lines that break, then we're in a lot of trouble. We have live sanitary sewage. Sanitary sewers, if you remember, don't have valves on them. Neither do storm sewers. Water mains have valves on them, but sanitary sewers, there's no way to stop them. So this is another proactive reason why we want to stabilize that bluff to make sure those sanitary sewers don't move, God forbid they don't break. And then obviously drainage improvements that we're going to achieve on the tableland, and then there's some natural areas, some work we're going to be doing on the ravine a little bit south of the parking lot up on top. So Byron is going to do his best to take us through the numbers and present the project to you.
Thank you, Director Thomas. So what we have here is the a map of the bluff portion of the project, and then the next slide will be some more detail about the boardwalk portion. So I think everyone has seen this before, but I'm just going to go into it real quickly. So the project consists of 3 wall segments: the green segment, the blue segment, in the middle. And Director Thomas mentioned the 2 sanitary sewers that this project also helps protect. Those are within that blue area, and then you have the red area to the south as well. The scope of the project includes drilled concrete foundations and then concrete precast panels that then slide into those foundations. That's how it's held up. There's under drains along the top of the wall. That's to help with the drainage on the top portion. There's also a couple storm sewers at the top as well to help with that drainage. And then along the slope or under the slope, there's wick drains, which is kind of an innovative approach that some private owners have been using the last couple years that has been pretty successful. Basically, the wall is kind of the structural component of helping to keep the bluff intact. What this does is it basically helps drain all the water within it to keep that pore pressure out as well. So those wick drains should be very helpful. And then down at the bottom, you kind of see those darker black areas, those hatches. It says native BMP. So those are some of the sustainable elements of this project. Those are basically bioswales. So the water that's drained along the bluff, either through the wick drains or those storm sewers, will be attenuated through those bioswales. And then on the kind of towards the south, you'll see the boardwalk, which I will go through on the next slide. So the boardwalk design. So the boardwalk is more or less where the previous boardwalk was, the one that was removed in 2018 due to concerns with the structural integrity and overall safety. During the coordination process with internal staff and a private donor, that geometry changed a little bit, where it's a little bit longer for some view sheds, and it's also a little bit longer due to being ADA compliant, which was deemed to be an important part of the project. So in April 2022, the City Council approved a design agreement with Hay & Associates to include and incorporate this with the overall project, with the bluff. The timing of the design allowed it to be incorporated, and it was included with all the 3 bids that Director Thomas mentioned. Also, Director Swarthart has worked with a potential donor. Those funds aren't confirmed at this point, but it's something that's being worked through. And then this was bid as a separate bid alternate in the February bidding, and the amount for the boardwalk did exceed both the public and private funding that's available. So now with this table, this is basically a quick look at what the bids were whenever we opened them. So in a couple slides, I'll walk you through kind of how we're paying for everything, but this is kind of a snapshot of what it looked like whenever we opened it. So on the left, you kind of have, well, the very left column, you have the 2 firms that bid. So you have John Keno and then V3. You also see another company below that, which I'll explain that shortly. The next column over is the base bid amount. So the budget, as Director Thomas mentioned, it was $4.95 million. We received a bid for the base project, which is basically the walls, from John Keno in the amount of around $4.6 million. We also received a bid from V3. Moving over to the next column to the right is a sanitary lining. So we included this as a bid alternate, basically meaning We can bid it out with the project. If the cost is not favorable, we don't have to award that component. Both of those came in a little bit higher than we expected. So John Keno was around 117, and then V3 was around 110. We were able to save some money here by looking to get a quote from our MPI contractor, which is Hare Construction, which is actually on the agenda tonight as a consent item, where they basically use that pricing that we have for our core lining project. They gave us that same pricing, and it amounted to $64,000. So we're proposing to use their price for that and not use any of the prices from the actual bid. Moving over to the right, you'll have the full boardwalk bid amount. You won't see any of the amounts there in bold because it does exceed the funding, as I mentioned previously. And if you move to the right a little bit, what we did was we kind of broke out those prices a little bit, and we did the math to basically show what it would be if we just did the boardwalk foundations itself. And basically, doing the boardwalk foundations, I'll go into that in a little bit, actually on the next slide, but basically that's utilizing the contractor already being on site, utilizing today's pricing. So the price for that for John Keno would be $496,000. So talking a little bit more about the boardwalk costs, as I know it's probably a concern for some. The boardwalk bid came in at about $2.727 million with a 10% contingency, which is our standard contingency that we add to construction items. That brings us to just under $3 million. So that exceeds our public funding that's available, which is $1.335 million. I mentioned earlier that there have been some private donor conversations that have occurred. At the November Finance Committee meeting, we did get direction that any additional money would have to be through private funding. The staff recommendation at this point is to proceed with just the foundation portion of the boardwalks, which would be $496,054. Doing the concrete foundations now, well, in the future, that price will go up. I mean, obviously, we've all seen the market volatility the last few years, so we know if it's not done right now with this pricing, it certainly will go up in the next few years. And installing the foundations with this project, basically you're utilizing the specialized equipment that's already mobilized to do the wall, and you're minimizing some of that disruption, meaning you're basically doing it while we're already there, as opposed to coming back as a separate operation. So this is kind of the big slide here. I know there's a lot going on here, and I'll take it slowly. So whenever we did present this to the Public Works Committee a few weeks back, they appreciated the slide, but they did say it was a little bit hard to follow. So we did make a few changes. And before I jump in, I will say that although we list the actions at the bottom, this item is on the consent agenda, the omnibus agenda. But what we did do to the chart was kind of show some color coding. So basically, you can follow the costs from the top and then kind of see where it goes to the bottom and how those costs add up. So looking at the table as a whole, the column on the left is a funding source. So you have the capital fund, the park and public land fund, and then the water fund. Moving to the right, you have the project component. So it describes, we have basically the construction inspection at the top with Hay and Associates, and then we have different components of the project for the wall itself, and then moving down we have the installation of the boardwalk foundations. And then one thing that's important to point out under the water fund, so you'll see where it says section B1 wall. So whenever I was describing the map earlier on, I mentioned that section B1 wall, that area that was in blue, that wall helps support those two sanitary sewers. So with it being sanitary sewers, we were able to propose, by working with Director Holub, that a portion of that wall cost should be able to be offset by the water fund because it helps protect that asset. So what we are proposing is to offset half the cost of that wall, which is $220,902. So basically, that $220,902 was subtracted from the original base bid, with that amount basically being offset by the water fund. So half of the wall is by the water fund, half of the wall is by the capital fund. Moving down, still within the water fund, you'll see the sanitary lining. That is the bid, or the quote rather, that we got from Hare Construction, that we're proposing to use that quote. So that's kind of the middle component. To the right, you'll see all the different costs. So it'll specify if it's, if there's contingency or not included. And then to the right, you'll see the contractor that it's associated with. So Hay and Associates at the top right, they are proposed to do the construction inspection. They have all the design knowledge, so that would make sense to have them on board for that, as well as 3 years of bluff monitoring. Basically 1 year being right now before the design to basically confirm the design assumptions, and then 2 years following the construction to basically confirm that the water levels and everything is looking as we expected. Also, or further down on the right under the contractor, you'll see John Keno basically 3 times in a row. So they have 3 different components of the project. The first being the base portion of the wall, and then moving down into the park and public land portion, the installation of the boardwalks, and then moving down again, the portion of the wall that's being paid by the water fund, and then moving down again on that contractor column, you have Hare Construction for that sanitary lining. So I kind of circled the chart trying to show how everything adds up. So basically, the red amount at the top would be the total amount for Hay and Associates, which correlates to the box towards the bottom, and then looking at the green boxes in the top of the table, you add up those 3, it correlates to the middle box at the bottom, and then again, looking up at the table in the blue for the sanitary lining, that correlates with the bottom box at the bottom. In terms of construction schedule, minimizing impacts to the beach is an important thing. So that's kind of been a topic of discussion really the last couple years. The whole design has kind of taken that into account. I think there's other ways that you could have built this that would have been more intrusive to the beach. I think this design does help mitigate the impacts, certainly. But whenever we put together the design bids, the specs, with Dave and his team, we also took that into account in terms of the schedule. So the anticipated start date would be September 18th. And basically the thought of that would be after the Labor Day holiday, and then also, a little bit later in the year so that we're not, going into the boating season quite as much. We really wanted to leave that summer season really open. So we feel like by starting September 18th, we're achieving that partially. And then the construction would be through the fall, through the winter, with an anticipated completion date sometime in mid to late March. And then the landscaping would be in the spring. I believe some of that will be in-house, and having that hopefully all in place, ready for the next beach season in 2024. So with that, I can take any questions.
Questions for Byron?
Hopefully sounds like my voice made it through, so.
I do have
Are
a
you-
question,
are you
and I'm
sneezing,
sneezing.
or
I'm
are
doing
you-
both.
Alderman Rum.
Can you, or someone on the staff, just review the sustainability elements that are incorporated into this?
Yeah, sure.
plan?
Actually, Dave, you want to take this one? This might be a good one for you.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and again.
Here you go, Dave.
Could you, use the microphone, please?
Thank you, Alderman, for the question. And one thing I just want to point out is we've been through the design, summary on this a couple times. Just to clarify for everybody, nothing changed on the design. It was just a case of the bidding environment. But, like Byron mentioned, one of the primary features we're doing from a sustainability perspective is all of the drainage we're bringing to the bottom, we're incorporating in kind of those black lines that he shows there. Those are native planted bioswales. So that takes some of that existing turf grass space at the bottom there and creates bioswales out of that. That again, native vegetation, a little bit deeper rooted, more infiltration as part of that, instead of running off right over the lawn, towards the beach area now. Additionally, while there will be, some impacts to the bluff while we're doing this, one of the things we knew we wanted to try to achieve with this project was to not have, full clearing of the bluff. So we've kept that fairly confined to the corridor that needs restoration, much of which has already failed now. But, on the slope, we're maintaining, the majority of the trees outside of the immediate wall corridor, which really won't be all that visible because we will have those trees on the bottom and the top. And that whole disturbed area will then get reseeded with native seed and planted with native shrubs. On that, to sort of maintain the character of the bluff and be consistent with the, the previously prepared, bluff management plan that, the Forest Park Board had worked to put together.
So are we planting more trees also, or
Shrubs mostly.
we're not planting any more trees on the bluff itself?
What we've got in the contract is essentially an allowance and a list of trees and shrubs and plants that we'll work with Chuck's group to figure out. I think, quite honestly, one of the things we look at in a bluff and ravine setting like this is generally speaking, there tends to be more trees than would be a native condition, and honestly that sometimes can be part of what causes some of the localized failures. So we're trying to be strategic as to what we bring back onto the bluff. Right now it's a fairly wooded bluff, a lot of those not necessarily being native trees in some cases, and probably a little heavier canopy than we'd like to see, especially as it relates to some of that good ground holding vegetation. So I'd say we do have a few trees on our list. It is possible we may add some trees, but we're going to focus primarily on deep-rooted grasses and forbs and shrubs as part of that, and then that'll let some of those existing trees that are there, I think, blossom a little bit more, and once we open up the canopy a little bit.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Okay, well, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Nice presentation, very, very complicated subject presented very clearly, so thank you. So that was all in preparation for our omnibus. And so now we'll move on to the omnibus vote consideration. I've got 13 items, so take your no-dos. First is approval of the March 20th, 2023 City Council meeting minutes. Second is approval of the check register for the period of February 25th to March 24th, 2023. Third is approval of a resolution declaring Lake Forest as an idle-free community, which we talked about before. Fourth is approval of a resolution reallocating 2023 volume cap to the Village of Buffalo Grove, Illinois. Fourth is consideration of a request to waive the fidelity bond requirement in connection with holding a raffle in the city of Lake Forest for the Lake Forest Baseball Association and the Church of the Holy Spirit. I believe there's actually two raffles, although the language here is a little confusing. Sixth is authorization of the city manager to execute a 2-year professional services agreement for city engineering services with Gaywalt Hamilton Associates, Inc., in an amount not to exceed $43,000 for fiscal year 2024 and $45,000 for fiscal year 2025, and for permit reviews when the full cost is reimbursable by the developer or property owner. Seventh is award of the low bid for the 2023 sewer lining program to Hare Construction, Inc., and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement in the amount not to exceed $108,000. Eighth is consideration to approve contracts and bids for the Forest Park Bluff Slope Stabilization Project to include approval of construction inspection and bluff monitoring services for the Forest Park Bluff Slope Stabilization Project to Hay and Associates, Inc., in the amount of $56,565, and authorize the city manager to execute an agreement with 2 additional 1-year bluff monitoring renewals in the amount of $11,565 per year. And award of the low bid for the Forest Park Bluff Slope Stabilization Project to John Keno and Company, Inc., and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement in the amount of $5,097,174 and a 10% construction contingency in the amount of $509,717.40 for a total of $5,606,891.40. And third, and finally, award of the low bid for the Forest Park Bluffs sanitary sewer lining to Hair Construction, Inc., and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement in the amount of $64,570 and a 10% construction contingency in the amount of $6,457 for a total of $71,027. That completes the section on the Forest Park bluff slope. Ninth, approval to award a one-year contract for Recreation Department program busing services to Safeway. 10th, approval for an advancement of fiscal year 2024 capital funding for the installation of Aquaflex water place surfacing on the splash pad at Town Line Park to Landscape Structures, Inc. in the amount of $56,000. 11th, approval to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Mariani Landscape for grounds maintenance services at Forest Park in the park's fiscal year 2024 budget for an amount not to exceed $53,517.07. 12th, approval of the annual tree purchasing for fiscal year 2024 in an amount not to exceed $100,000. And finally, 13th, approval to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Landscape Concepts Management for citywide grounds maintenance services in the park's fiscal year 2024 budget for an amount not to exceed $181,402. Are there any items here that any member of the council would like to have removed or taken separately? Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the 13 omnibus items as presented.
So, second.
Second from Alderman Rummel. Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Novit? Aye. Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Notes?
Aye.
Alderman Gushgarian?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
Alderman Weber?
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is additional items for discussion or comments by council members. Alderman Bushman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. After over 6 years here on the DS, I expect this to be my last council meeting, since in 2 weeks, my wife and I are planning, after 27 years, to move out of the Fourth Ward, which does require my resignation. However, I do expect to be at the upcoming Fourth Ward meeting in 10 days on April 13th with my colleague. Mr. Mayor, if you would be so kind to indulge me, I'd like to make a few closing comments in light of this being my concluding meeting.
Fine.
First, I'd like to say it's been a great honor serving the city and its citizens as the Fourth Ward Alderman, first appointed back in December 2016, and then elected by the citizens of the Fourth Ward to serve the maximum 3 terms. I truly have valued the opportunity to be a public servant in this great city. I'd also like to express my gratitude in having gotten to know and in having the opportunity to work with the city staff, many of you going back to 20 years when I joined the Building Review Board. Thank you for your dedication, your professionalism, your kindness, and your respect. Hopefully, I've been somewhat successful in my efforts to reciprocate in kind. In any event, let me now reaffirm my highest respect for all of you and what you have contributed and continue to contribute to the city. Thank you, city staff. Now some comments from my fellow aldermen. Yes, we have had our differences, but I really don't believe any apologies are warranted for being different, for having different perspectives. We do come from different backgrounds, and even our citizens are different in many different ways. More importantly, I still believe it important to probe issues, to question plans, to consider the cons as much as the pros. This is what's needed to enhance decision-making. It should not be considered divisive, a term used at times. Even to come to a different informed decision on the merits is not divisive, but should be expected as part of meaningful dialogues and deliberations. What is divisive is to respond to such differences with scorn or hostility. That can be divisive. Let me now speak to a fundamental principle. The City of Lake Forest has its mission statement, and it reads, quote, "Be the best managed, fiscally responsible, and appealing community, and promote a community spirit of trust, respect, and citizen involvement," close quotes. So true. And because it is such a great mission statement, I'd like to spend a little time on the various components. First, be best managed. To me, that means investing in and supporting an outstanding staff. They are the ones that have the commitment to manage and operate our great city. Being fiscally responsible. To me, that means being ever mindful as to how we spend not our money, but our taxpayers' dollars. And it has to be based upon need, merit, priorities, and yes, frugality. We need to be an appealing community. That means respecting our city's character, our heritage, and the quality of life deserving of our residents. And yes, promote respect. To do that, we all need to be knowledgeable, kind, considerate, and civil. We need to promote trust. This is a trait that comes not from us, but from our citizens as to how they perceive us. To warrant a responsive trust from our citizens, one needs to be seen as honest, thoughtful, transparent, ethical, and civil. These are the traits that would promote trust. And finally, promote citizen involvement, reaching out and welcoming input from our citizens, listening, learning, understanding what they're saying, both from the few and the many, and always being respectful of what our citizens have to say. No chilling effects, and I'm glad we made a progress in one of the elements there. This is our mission, and I hope we all can stay committed to that mission. Finally, I'd like to thank the many citizens I've gotten to know, not just from the Fourth Ward, but throughout this wonderful city. We are blessed with so many outstanding citizens, and they have certainly been an inspiration to me and provided support and comfort I'll always cherish. Thank you, the citizens of Lake Forest. That concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Well, it's been a pleasure to work with you over these years, and you've always brought a level of diligence that is, I would say, extraordinary and sometimes frustrating, but makes for better decisions, as you said. And so we'll be sad to miss you these last two meetings, but congratulations on your relocation. It's a big life event, I know, when you move out of the family homestead and into the next thing. So thank you.
Thank
you. And any other comments?
Alderman Bushman was one of the first aldermen to welcome me as the only new member this year on City Council. And I just wanted to thank you for making me feel welcome and sitting down and spending time with me and helping me kind of navigate the way, just the whole process. And I really appreciated it. Thank you very, very much.
Alderman Weber.
Ray, you didn't tell me for sure that this was your last meeting. So off the cuff here, I would have prepared some more sentimental comments.
That was intentional.
That'll have to be at the ward meeting for all of you to hear. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for your leadership, your partnership, and our ability to yin and yang at times, bringing different perspectives. I think that's so important, and got to know you as a resident. I, as a resident, with concerns when you were serving on council throughout this time. And I just wholeheartedly thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure working with you.
Thank you.
Alderman Morris.
Well, just briefly, I just wanted to say thanks for 6 years of service. As George has said, it's been challenging at times, but thanks for your service. I appreciate it.
Alderman Oates.
Ray, obviously, we'll miss you on the board. We are a body of 8 individual minds for a reason. We are not going to agree on everything. And for that, we come to better decisions. And you challenged us to consider other perspectives. And absolutely, that goes appreciated on behalf of all the residents of Lake Forest. I hope your relocation will keep you running into at Walker Brothers, but in any event, it's really been a pleasure serving with you, Ray. Thank you.
Alderman Rummel.
Again, this took me by surprise as well. I know you've been considering it for a while as your life plans have changed. I'm just glad that you waited until we only have 2 meetings left and didn't do it before that, because I think your advice and counsel and your measured deliberations on items would be sorely missed. I hope that your successor, whoever it is, and whoever our successors are, a number of us are going out, will have the same deliberation and professional way of evaluating issues that come before us. I think that you brought the full scope of your professional life to the citizens of Lake Forest in your deliberations and in how thoroughly you analyzed the issues before the council. And that is something that I hope we don't lose with a man of your measure leaving the council. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your friendship and for your service to this community.
Ray. Again, this is a surprise. First, I have a question. Just exactly what ward are you moving into?
That will be a surprise.
Oh, Lord help me. Lord help me. You know, again, taken aback by this. No, we have not often agreed, and indeed, we've rarely agreed. But I do recognize that you have a level of commitment to the city that is heartfelt. You have given it everything that you felt is what's right, and that I will acknowledge, and I deeply appreciate your perspectives. And although we may have disagreed, I do understand that you are coming from a good place, and I think that more than anything needs to be acknowledged. You're like a dog with a bone on this athletic field project, Ray. Sometimes I wonder if we understand what democracy really means, but I do understand that you have very strong opinions, and I respect you for the fact that you have them. I just really nothing more to add than I have enjoyed your collegiality. And I might say this is a little bit of a word of encouragement to some of my fellow aldermen. Probably some of the most enjoyable times I've spent with Ray is not here in City Hall. It has been having coffee with him on rare occasion, but also Ray and I took the Citizens Fire Academy together. And for those of you who are trying to figure out how to get a better grasp on what's going on in the city, for you newcomers, specifically, I would encourage you to do that, because that's another opportunity to get to know staff, but also your fellow aldermen. Ray, it has been a pleasure. I want to thank you for your time, your efforts, your true sincerity, and your willingness to serve, because in this day and age, it's not easy for any of us to sit up here.
It's not easy, and thank you very much, and thank my fellow aldermen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if I may, can I make a motion to adjourn our meeting?
Can I just jump in real fast? Sorry, not quite yet, Alderman Bushman, and I'll echo a lot of the comments from your colleagues on the council, and just acknowledging this is a little more impromptu than perhaps any of us would have liked, but I just want to make sure I have the opportunity to say as well on behalf of the entire city staff how thankful we are for your service to the community, and also for your support of staff compared to most of the people you see in the room. My tenure and relationship with you is much shorter. Thinking back to your time on the legal committee, the building review board, your years of service to this community speak for themselves. And I hope you know sincerely, and I think I've shared this with you, that as a city staff, we're here to provide professional recommendations, but we don't always get it right. And the willingness of aldermen to ask tough questions, to probe a little on recommendations, not only leads to better outcomes, but ultimately makes us better employees and professionals in our jobs for doing it. And so on behalf of the entire staff, I can say with confidence that we're all stronger because of the relationship we've been able to have with you. And so thank you very much for that relationship, and again, for your many years of service.
Thank you. Okay, motion to adjourn?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Meeting is adjourned.
You're going to stick around on the 17th?